we're in the worst recession I've ever seen in my lifetime. And he says, if you can navigate us financially through this, when it's over, I'll sell you the school.
Hi, I'm Tulay, and welcome to the Simple Profit Podcast, where we focus on one thing and one thing only, and that is to help you to build million-dollar grossing businesses. On today's show, we get the pleasure of talking to a good friend of ours, David Alvas, the president and CEO of USK Karate, as well as the president and founder of financialfitnessfocus.com. He really focused on what he did right and what he did wrong in growing the staff members to eventually grown to 2 locations and, of course, exiting his business. But first, David, hey, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being on here.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate this invite. It's a big honor to be able to join and talk with somebody that I have tremendous respect for. What you've done in the martial arts industry as a school owner and with my studio platform is, to say impressive is an understatement. So thank you.
Man, appreciate that. So it was funny, like when we launched my studio in 2018 with payments, and I remember calling you and talking to you and like, hey, David, I got this platform. I'd love to be on it. Your ability to pass on the fees and all that. And you were like, oh, dude, that's awesome. Let's jump on. So appreciate you being a promoter and just a support of our platform through the ups and downs of all of it throughout the years, man. Very happy to have you on board. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to say something about that. One of the things that I told people all the time is that when I remember those first few conversations that we had, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. And I had a lot of requests for the platform. And I remember you telling me we're going to get to all of them. And I just want to say that like, it's very impressive that you remembered all of those things. And over time, you got to all of the requests and then some. So that was impressive. And that's why I continue to refer my studio to people in the membership-based business world. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that, man. Thank you. Thank you. And the one thing that we take away from my studio, at least, is we love feedback because you guys are in the real world. You're using it just like us. So it goes definitely both ways. But we're here to focus on you because the series that we're on is multi-location operation. And USK Karate has 2 locations, very successful location. I can vouch for this. We want to dive deep into that. But David, how did you personally get started in martial arts, man?
So I've been training since I was 4 years old. It's actually a pretty interesting story. Like when I was 4 years old, I actually started bugging my parents to do martial arts. But the thing that my parents tell me that they still don't know the answer to this day, and I'm going to be 40 here in a couple months. They don't know how I knew anything about martial arts because I was 4 years old and I was never exposed to anything at that point in my life. I hadn't watched any cartoons or movies, but I kept telling them, put me in karate. And they don't know where I got that from. I don't know where I got that from. What was interesting is my parents were renting out an apartment to a martial arts school owner and in Homestead, Florida. So this was in the 80s. And he only taught adults. And my parents kind of went in and said, hey, listen, he keeps talking about this. We don't know where this is coming from, but we know you. We trust you. Can you teach him? He said, no, I started 13 years old and really my base is adults. And my parents kept begging and persisting. And they said, look, he can go in the back of the room and follow along, right? Like, but I'm not responsible for him. I'm not going to like take care of him. I'm not going to this is an teenage adult person. So I would show up. And I remember there was like a bamboo screen, like those old school bamboo screens that separated the lobby from the training floor.
Yeah.
And, it was a hole in the wall. It must have been like a total of 700 square feet studio total. And, carpet that wasn't even tacked down, because there was no money and all that stuff. And so I just followed along, and whatever the adults in the room did, I started moving my arms and somehow, some way, they grew a children's program, and I became a part of that children's program, and the rest is history. I've been training ever since. So that was 1988.
Yeah, so you kickstart that program, the children's program for them. And so when did you know that you could possibly make martial arts a career? Because for some of our listeners, they maybe not be business owners yet. They may be aspiring business owners, right? How did you know that, whether it's in dance, gymnastic, or whatever service-based business that you're looking at, when did you know that teaching martial arts could possibly be a full-time career and a lucrative one for you?
So when I knew it could be a full-time career is a separate date from when I knew it could be lucrative.
Yeah, exactly.
It was two very different things. So like when I was 12, I was decided. I was so enamored with and this is important, I think, for those who do teach currently or who are not owners, for them to understand the importance of their role in children's lives, because I don't think we really understand the impact that I know that we know as martial arts people, we have an impact, right?
Yep.
But like, I was enamored with my instructors, and everything they said and did was holy to me. And I wanted to be just like them. And I remember being 12 years old and knowing I wanted to make other people feel the way they're making me feel right now.
Yeah, a good instructor.
Yeah, very good. 12 years old was when I knew, I was telling myself I want to be a master and I want to run a school for a living. It wasn't until I was 19 that I went full-time professional. And I actually knew there was a real career there where I could pay my bills.
Can we unpack that real quick? At 12 years old, you knew, hey, I love doing this. I want to make people feel like the way my instructor is making me feel. When did you start teaching, and what was that opportunity you got, and what led you to 19?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started teaching, assisting on the floor at 13. And that's also when I tested for my Chodan, my midnight blue belt in Tang Sudo, black belt. And I started showing up every day after school. So I get out of school at 3:00. Classes started at 4. I went straight to the studio.
Sorry to butt in. Is this the same 700-foot studio?
No, at this point, it's not much bigger. I would say it's probably 1,200 square feet. So there was a movement there, but not anything glorious. So no, my instructor had moved the school across the street to a slightly bigger spot. I tested for my Chodan, 13. I start going every day. I get there at 3:30, scarf a peanut butter and jelly sandwich down, do my homework. And then at 4:00, I'm on the floor helping with all the classes. And I stayed till 8, 9 o'clock at night, cleaned up. And I did this every single day from 13 to 18 years old. I lived at the studio. If I wasn't at school, I was at the studio. And by the time I was 16, I was running all classes on my own. So my instructor owned it, but I was running all the classes. And I was also at that point doing enrollments. And I was even trying to push the studio forward. I mean, I didn't know anything. All I had was passion. And I heard through the industry that things were possible. Like if you remember back in those days, we had like a box in the front of the school where people would drop their tuition check, and that's how people paid tuition. Nothing was automated. But I heard that there were these really cool martial arts schools that were like getting everything on auto pay. So when I was like 16 years old, I reached out to, I don't remember what it was, but it was a EFT funding or something, like one of those auto pay. Yeah. So I reached out to them and I got our school set up on auto pay when I was 16, and I started doing enrollments and refining our enrollment process. And when I was 15, we had about 60 members. And by the time I was 18, we had 135.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And that's when I knew, I was like, man, I'm really good at this. I really love this. And I want to make a career out of it. So then while this is happening, I'm still participating in tournaments and clinics around the country and getting to know other Tang Sudo schools.
Right.
And one of the schools that I became very close with, because remember, I was in Homestead, which is south of Miami.
Yeah.
And then USK, the school that I now own, was actually already in existence in Coral Springs, which is about 60 miles north of, just outside Fort Lauderdale, of where my school was.
Got it.
And I actually met my wife at my second degree black belt test in 1999, and she was a student of USK. So I started visiting USK on the weekends because they didn't have any black belts yet, and they were trying to build. So I would come on the weekends and be a guest instructor and help my wife, help Master Pryor, who would become my instructor, who was my wife's instructor. So long story short, I developed a good relationship with USK. I graduate high school, and then I get a phone call from my wife's brother, who was also training at USK, and said, hey, Master Pryor wants to retire in a few years, and he wants to interview you to become the manager of USK, move you up to Coral Springs, and if you do a good job, there's an opportunity for you to take the school over one day. So
this was 18.
I was 18 years old.
That's a big decision to make right there. I guess you can, talk about going to college and you're here going, hey, there's a career path and potentially being an entrepreneur and business owner. And also there's this really cute girl that I like at this place.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. And funny, I had a full ride. I think this is an important detail because I graduated with a 4.7 GPA from high school. I had a full ride to Ford International.
I've never known those type of numbers, David. I'm in the twos, I stay right with the 2 GPAs, man.
I think you went to Harvard Business School. I think you're a little better than that.
This episode is brought to you by MyStudio.io, the customer management and billing software for the modern day business. MyStudio powers thousands of businesses to ensure that a sign up or a sale opportunity is never missed. Customer management and communication is easy and can be fully automated so you can focus on what matters the most, servicing your customers.
So I got a full ride to FIU.
Okay.
And then I got this interview opportunity with Master Pryor at USK. And I was going to school at night, working during the day, and I was miserable. I mean, I was absolutely miserable. Every time I pulled up to FIU, even though I knew I could do well there, I was so unhappy, and all I could think about was being in a martial arts school. And when I got the interview, I made the decision, much to my parents' dislike, to drop out of my full ride, my full scholarship to FIU, and I moved to Coral Springs, making $30,000 a year my first year, to take this job as a manager of USK. And within 5 or 6 years, I ended up buying the school.
That's amazing. Okay, so from 18, you dropped out to 24, 25, you became the business owner and you bought the school. So when you bought the school, was it a straight buyout? Was it a owner finance? Is it a partnership that you came in? Like, how did that play out for you, right? So because for those of you that are teaching right now, right, maybe you're 13, 14, maybe you're 18, maybe you're 20, maybe you're 30, 40, it doesn't matter, right? If you're working at a location and there's an opportunity, if you're managing and either looking at opening a brand new location or purchasing the current one, I've seen more success stories with people buying their current location, right, that they're working in, right? And this is the case with you as well. So how did that play out for you?
We had from day one knew that if I did my job, I was going to take over. We didn't know how that was going to look, but I also was very financially conservative. So as soon as I started working there, even making $30,000 a year, I started saving money little by little. And I saved up like 30 grand. And we went to lunch, Master Pryor and I, and said, hey, it's time. He said, I'm getting old. And at this point, he was in his mid to late 60s. And he said, it's time for me to retire. And he said, what are you offering? What's on the table? And I said, well,
wait a minute, but this is a great setup. So he is giving you a blank slate to be like, offer me something.
Yes.
That's cool. Okay.
Yes. So now there's an important detail before I tell you guys what I offered and why I offered it. So in 2007 and 8 and 9, the recession hit, right? And it got very rough. Like I remember at one point, I was in charge of inputting all the numbers into QuickBooks and stuff like that. And at one point after we paid all of our bills, we had like $900. That's it in the checking account. And I remember vividly, he walked into my office at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday, and he put the checkbook to the studio on the desk. It was one of those big checkbooks with like a hardcover. And he put it on the desk, and he gave me a Post-it note with passwords to all the accounts. And he said, here's the deal, David. We're in the worst recession I've ever seen in my lifetime. This is what he says to me. And he says, if you can navigate us financially through this, because I know you can teach, I know you can sign people up. If you can navigate us through this financially, when it's over, I'll sell you the school.
Okay.
So now I had access to all the data, I know what the school is really making, gross and net, what my instructor's making, what its history is. I have access to all the information.
Yeah.
So long story short, obviously we, by some miracle we got through it, and we're at this lunch now where he says, okay, make me an offer. So I said, well, the school's netting about $100,000 a year net profit. I said, I'll give you 3 years worth of net profit. So a multiple of 300 grand. I have $30,000 down payment, but I need you to finance me on the rest. He said, done. It was literally that fast.
So 10% down. How long was the payments and what interest?
5 years and like a 3.5% interest rate, something like that.
Okay, so let me break this down to the viewers real quick here. How good of a deal this would be if someone offered you this. Typically in a service-based business, people will not sell unless it's 4x. This is when they're making money. If the school is not making money, no amount of money is worth it, right, to buy. So the school is making $100,000 at value, right? It would be $400,000 to a buyer. However, you're working the school and you've solved a pain that the business had. Therefore, you're taking a discount on $300,000, which the owner at the time more than happy to take it because he was already out the door. The thought of him going back to work if you quit open your own school, it's not something he wants to look at. So it's a win-win setup.
Correct. And being late 60s, it's almost not even that he wants to, it's almost impossible at that point for his age, right? Because what is he going to do? Teach 3 years old at 72? So that's number one. Number two, he agreed to the 3x multiple instead of the 4x because he knew that I was responsible for growing the school. And then
Up to that point, yeah.
I almost was hurting myself because I was upping the value of the school every year because I was enrolling more and more members and making the school more profitable. And I mentioned that to him. And he agreed that because I had increased the value of the school, I increased the value of the school, and he gave me a discount on that.
Yeah. Solid offer. From a finance standpoint, just looking at the data point without all the background, obviously he has no other option, right? So understand your exit strategy here and leverage if you're negotiating. For you, you had great leverage and you had proven experience in running the school. So $30,000 down, you have $270,000 split over 5 years, okay? Which means you're going to make $100,000, probably a little bit more because the owner's salary no longer is there. Easy payment. I'm guessing you paid this thing off early.
Yes, 2.5 years.
There you go. See, so that's what I mean. Now you're fully owner in and it's a win-win situation, right? The owner got paid, right? If he invested his money well, that's on him at that point. But now you own the school fully. So mapping out a way to pay is good. A lot of times as a business owner, you cannot expect a check for $400,000 or $300,000. You may have to take a look at an exit strategy where say, okay, good, am I okay with providing a loan to the current person who's in there, and at what risk are you looking at, right, for an exit strategy? So I think the owner self-financing model works well. I always recommend try to take a little deeper cut, like a 25% down if possible, right? But in your case, I think you negotiate that well. So perfect. 2008, you took it through the recession. 2009, 10. I'm guessing 2009, you bought the school?
Correct.
Okay, a year after recession. And then the school's running really well, and I'm guessing you grew it. So let's talk about the mindset. What was your mindset like from the day you signed that agreement that you're the owner compared to David Alvas, the manager, the day before?
That's, wow. A combination of great excitement and great fear. Also, right around the time that I had signed to buy the school, the lease was coming up. And I knew we needed more space. At that point, we had 2,000 square feet, and I wanted to double it. I wanted 4,000. So 30 days after, I said, well, my mindset was, I'm going to go big or go home, right? Like I dropped out of college with a full ride, and I just put myself $270,000 in debt. And at this point, I either go all in on that because I'm really banking on myself. And if I don't do that, like, what did I just do? Right? Like, what did I just spend the last 6-7 years of my life doing? So I negotiated a lease and moved our school within 30 days of signing and buying the business to a new 4,000 square foot location. And you and I have talked about leases and lease negotiations in the past. And I know you've made a lot of comments and helped a lot of people on Facebook with this. But one of the things I did in that time period was I negotiated with the new location. I said, look, I got to carry this other location for a few more months, and I want to get into your location now. So how about for the time when there's an overlap, I just pay you CAM reconciliation, right? You give me a CAM, not reconciliation, but just CAM. And you just give me a basic open box. You know, I don't want to pay for a bill. I just need a box. I'll bring my mats and everything. Give me a box. You will build that into the rent for a couple extra dollars a square foot. Because I don't want to, I just dropped $30,000 on buying a school. I don't want to put more cash out. So did that, signed, moved into the new location, carried both for about 2 or 3 months. And then when the other school lease ended, my rent went up to the full rent, and I was rolling in this new 4,000 square foot facility.
That's awesome. Really, really nice way to kind of balance that out. To get into a new lease so now you got a 4,000 square foot facility.
Yes.
Okay. And so at that operation point, this is 2009 as well?
Yeah. So I bought the school in August, and then by October, I was in the new location.
Okay. Obviously, build out costs, move costs, and all that. You have to figure that out. When did you decide, right, from that moment on to open your second location? And then what kind of prompted that decision to move there? So we just talked about becoming an instructor, a student, to becoming the owner, rocking through your first rent negotiation. And now, when did you say, hey, I think I'm ready for a second location?
I knew that I was going to have multiple locations, but I also was very fortunate that my instructors in martial arts pushed patience and not, forgive my bluntness, not giving a crap about what anybody else is doing and not trying to keep up with the Joneses. So I knew I was going to have a second location, but I kept looking around our industry and seeing that the majority of people that opened a second location were so stressed out and financially struggling. And very few were actually doing it well. So I said, you know what, let me study all the people in our industry who are doing very well and what the difference is. I knew at that point I was going to have a second location. I just knew that I was going to do two things. I was going to save up a lot of money because I kept hearing everybody in our industry complaining that they ran out of money. So I said, okay, I'll save a lot of money before I open a second. And number two, I knew that staffing, and I've always known this, was a problem in the martial arts industry because we can't just put a for hire sign on the window and get a Tang Soo Do, second degree black belt that can teach, right?
Right.
So I knew that I had to solve two problems. I had to have a lot of money, and I had to have a lot of instructors because I knew people were going to quit because I was watching it happen around me all the time. So I didn't even, at that point, my mindset was not really on how fast can I get a second location. My mindset was, how fast can I save the money and build the team? Because I knew the second location was a byproduct of that mindset.
That's awesome, man. So you knew that you needed a emergency fund for the school and you needed staff, like two things to get going. So what was the time like from the first location to the second location? When did you finally decide, hey, I'm going to open my second location now?
2017, I made the decision. And then 2018, I signed the lease and opened.
Great timing, like right before the pandemic,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So the reason it took me so long, to be brutally honest, is because I completely screwed up building teams. And I built this really great team initially in between 2009 and 2013 that were unbelievably skilled martial artists and unbelievably skilled teachers, but a lot of character problems, a lot of flaws. And I built like a team of 5 or 6 people and I turned them all over. I lost all of them. And, at the time, it was a big defeat and it hurt. emotionally, but it was a blessing because when I focused on the second time and tried to do it, I learned from all the mistakes I made. And from 2014 to 2017, I built another team. And that team eventually would become my partners today. So again, that's the patience factor that I was very fortunate that my mentors beat into me is like, there's a lot of time. You're very young. You know, if you do it hard for 5 years and it's a complete disaster, another 5 years to do it right is not going to kill you, you know? And I was very fortunate with that. And then in 2017, I made the decision and we signed a lease for a second location.
I think that's such a good takeaway for our listeners because a lot of time we want to move fast and move quickly. And what you did was you basically had to start over, right? You could have settled and be like, you know what? I'm going to deal with these character flaws, but then I get my second location. And then you open up your second location and that particular flaw is super magnified.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not there to oversee that staff member and you can't be at two places at the same time. So then you may ruin the one location is doing great for you. Now you have two locations are losing money potentially, right? Really good takeaway. So you took your time in building the right staff. Here's a question I have for you. When you signed that lease for the second location, how did you know which staff you're going to put in there?
Great question. First of all, I knew that I was never going to build a monster location like my first one with 4,000 feet, 300 members, $1 million plus revenue. It's in my opinion, it's just too hard. So I was learning a bunch of different things, different mindsets. I had different mentors at the time that were coaching me. And I learned things like it's better to make a little bit of money from a lot of people, type of mentality than, to try and make a lot of money from one or two. Because if I've got two clients that are paying me $500,000 a year to make $1 million and one drops out, I'm in a lot of trouble. But if I have 300-400 people paying $200 and one cancels, who cares, right? Like, you go and enroll another person and it doesn't change your life. So that mentality was very present and in my mind when I was looking at the second location. And I also knew I didn't want it to require a lot of staff like my first one does. I wanted to build a location that was very streamlined, very, very low cost, very low maintenance. And today that location has 100 members, does between $25,000 and $30,000 a month, has a 40% profit margin, and is run by my partner and a couple of teenage assistants. That's it.
Beautiful. How did you know which staff members you were going to put? Right? Obviously, you build a team. There may be 3-4 people in the team. When you signed that lease, how did you know which staff members and who did you choose to run that location?
I learned through the years to focus on picking people with solid character and a solid work ethic over their ability to teach martial arts. And that's where I made my mistake in the beginning. So that was a big focus for how I picked Eileen Waters. She's now my partner at that location. But she was my choice because her loyalty factor was through the roof. She was the type of person that if I were stuck in the middle of the desert 200 miles away and I called her at 3:00 in the morning and said, hey, I'm stuck, she would happily, not just do it, but she would happily get up and drive and find me in the desert and bring me back. And I always said to myself after making the mistake with the first team, I can teach anybody how to teach. I can teach anybody how to do an enrollment. I can teach anybody how to do a front kick. But as much as I think we like to give ourselves credit as martial arts instructors, you really can't teach somebody how to be a good person. Like that happened at home when they were babies and small children. We can strengthen which is already there, right? But I looked for who has the strongest character and work ethic, and it was Eileen. She was not my best instructor. She was not my best martial artist, but I knew she was going to do whatever it took to be successful in that location, and she was going to do it happily. And knock on wood, it was one of the few decisions I got right in my life.
There you go. Both people are happy. That's interesting. So character first, yeah? From what you're saying.
Character and work ethic.
Yeah, you had character issues with the previous team. You found somebody who zero issues with character, and she's willing to work, right? I think the second part is work ethic. I think is important to point out. And if you don't mind me asking, who was candidate B? Like if Eileen wasn't it, who was the other one, and why did you choose that particular person? We don't have to put names out there, but like, what was the second candidate like or not like that you said, you know what, Eileen's going to be better?
The second person was a phenomenal martial arts teacher and technician, and great character, good person, but a little bit young, and wasn't quite ready to understand the work ethic that it took to build a business, and didn't quite understand yet, and not by their fault, just a young person that just need more time.
Got it.
To understand the concept of an investment, like investing time, investing energy to grow a location, and then see how that location could then become, a potential partnership for them. And that vision, they were struggling to see it. So that's what made me choose Eileen, because she was a little bit older, and life had, taught her some things that made her appreciate the opportunity that was in front of her.
Some really good insights, David. Thanks so much for sharing with me and our listeners here. So you got a good technician, maybe maturity wasn't there yet, and you have someone that's willing to see the opportunity, ready to take it, and is willing to work for it, and you can trust them fully. Yes. Perfect. Good choice. And it worked out well, right? I mean, on paper, you write it out, you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense to make that choice. But sometimes it's hard to make that choice in real life. So you said that she was your partner. I'd love to dive deep into this. Like, what does that mean, right? So, and if I'm opening a second location, I always need to ask myself, what's in it for me and what's in it for the other person that's going into this relationship with? It sounds like this person isn't only a staff member. You kept referring to partner. And what does that mean in USK Karate to be a partner with you?
Right. So, before I answer that, I think I need to give one quick shout out to Mr. Greg Horton, because I had a conversation with him before I opened this location. And one of the things he said to me was profound. And I think that people should, one, he should get the credit for it. And two, people need to hear it, because it ties into her becoming a partner eventually. He said, David, you've done a really good job building a culture at the first USK, right? It's a living entity. It's a machine that turns on and runs by itself because the culture makes it run. He said, but when you open a second location and there are 0 members, there is no culture. And, you need to make sure that you're very conscious of that from the very beginning. And that was profound advice that I hope he knows I'm very thankful for that advice, because I am very good at building a culture, but when I did it the first time, I did it subconsciously. I didn't do it intentionally. On this second location, I coached Eileen based on Mr. Horton's advice, and said, listen, everyone at the first location knows that when we do opening ceremonies, they're supposed to stand up. Like it just happens, right? No one's going to stand up in the lobby when you have your very first class with 5 students, because they have no idea that that's what's supposed to happen. So everything that we do there, you got to actually make it very in their face. You have to mention everything and say everything. You can't just assume everyone's going to follow the processes that are happening at the other location, because you don't have senior parents and senior students to show them the way. So that was invaluable advice from Mr. Horton that he gave me, that we implemented, and I think we did a good job with it, because the school did well enough based on that advice that we were able in 2021 for Eileen to end up becoming my partner. Also for Hans and Shelby, who are running my first location, to become partners there. I did a simultaneous, everyone signed on the same day to become partners in both locations.
At both locations. So the people who were running your location at the original location, USK Karate, and Eileen at the new location signed this partnership agreement.
on the same day for both. They're both obviously separate businesses, separate tax IDs, but we made it a point that we all wanted to become partners together. So our attorneys were working on everything, and we ended up signing for both locations at the same day and going out and celebrating that night.
All right. So your businesses are on different entity, USK LLC 1 or Inc. 1, USK LLC or Inc. 2, two different locations. So when you look at a partnership, now are these partners, do they own equity? Did they buy equity in, or were they given equity? Or how does that play out when you say partnership in this particular case?
So they bought a percentage. They bought in. They wrote a check to purchase, between 20 and 25% of the equity in the company and become owners. That's basically what happened. Is I coached them throughout the years in how to save the money to be able to buy in, and they did it. And they bought in and they became partners in the locations that way. I did, like my instructor did with me, I did sell them the equity at a discount because of the sweat equity that they had helped put into help building the locations. So they certainly wrote some sizable checks, Yeah. We're talking about checks between $50,000 and $100,000, but they did get a nice discount on that because they helped build the locations.
Yeah, I would say that's not bad. And getting that. So you got them bought in, their equity, so that when they're growing the company, they feel good about it. And then you're not in the school, I imagine, right? You're out. You got two partners working in these two locations. You're the majority owner, but you're not an on-site majority owner. So what did you do with your free time, or what are you doing with your free time? I mean, how much time do you spend working on the business? I'm guessing you're not in the business.
No, I'm not in. My partners are phenomenal. My partners do a wonderful job. They run those schools top notch. I spend about 2 hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week meeting with my partners every week. And we train martial arts training, sales training. We talk about business growth. We go over plans, objectives, how we're going to do it. I talk to them every single day. And then my children train at USK. So I am there, but I'm not there working. It's a wonderful thing to be able to take my kids, and my students are teaching my kids. My partners are teaching my kids. It's beautiful.
That's awesome.
But really, I would say I spend about 5 hours a week running both USKs, between the numbers, the marketing, the advertising, the meetings. They handle the rest.
That's beautiful. So then let's shift our focus to financialfitnessfocus.com. You started this, I'm guessing, with emphasis on trying to help people to become financially free, and also personal coaching, but as well as small business as well. Tell me a little bit how that started and what that is for you.
So it's tied into the martial arts schools, right? And it's tied into staff. One of the things that I noticed when I was telling you earlier about that first batch of team members that I lost was that, even back, so you go back to like 2008, 9, 10, minimum wage in South Florida, if I remember correctly back then, was like sub $8 an hour. It was maybe 7 and change or something like that. And I was paying my teenage instructors between $12 and $15 an hour. So a lot of money for teenagers at that time period, right? And they kept coming into work complaining about money and being stressed out about money. And I said, guys, you're living at home. You're 17 years old and you're making $15 an hour. Like, you're rich. Like, what are you talking about complaining about money? And the light bulb went off for me that, like, it doesn't matter how much I pay them. I could pay them $1 million a year. They're not going to manage it correctly, which is then going to turn into stress and aggravation and depression. And they're going to bring that to the studio. So I was like, I need to protect them. And in doing so, it will help protect the studio and the studio's energy. So I started having meetings with them and teaching them about budgeting and credit and savings and putting money away and all that stuff. And I noticed that they got happier because they had more money and they felt in control, and they went on to buy their own cars and eventually buy houses or get their first apartment and stuff like that. And they would come to work happy. So I said, man, I enjoy doing this kind of the same way I enjoyed watching my martial arts schools. So word kind of got around from them telling their friends, hey, my instructor kind of gave me some advice and coaching on money. Maybe, you're telling me you've got a problem. Maybe he'll talk to you. I don't know. Give him a call. So I kind of started getting the reputation in the neighborhood of being the guy to call when you've got a money concern. So that's when the light bulb went off, and I was like, man, I should help people with this. So I launched Financial Fitness Focus. And then the other thing that I'm very, very excited about and I love doing is helping small businesses just not make the mistakes I made. I'm certainly not the biggest, most successful school owner in the world, and I'm not trying to be, but I know where I'm at. And it's kind of like in martial arts, right? Like you don't have to be a 9th degree black belt to be a teacher, right? Even if I'm just a red belt, there's still white, yellow, orange, green belts beneath me that can benefit from my guidance. So even though I don't own 20 locations and I'm not, I don't have $500 million in my bank, I have a decent amount, and I do have 2 locations that are doing very well without me being there. So I have a few things that I love to share with people to help get them to the same point that I'm at.
That's beautiful. So again, that's financialfitnessfocus.com to check that out. If you want to have a talk with David, I'm sure he'll love to talk to you. So David, I have a question for you. A lot of time on our show, we tell people like not to do something, like the do's and don'ts, I call them. So what would you say is the one mistake that you would say, if you can avoid this from your experience, it's going to make your life a lot easier in business and you're going to make more money?
Don't be undercapitalized.
Don't be undercapitalized. Like break that down for us just real quick.
Like you said, a lot of people are very anxious to open multiple locations, and they do it before they have the funds, not doing the math, realizing you're not going to go from 0 to 200 members in 3 months. Maybe you've heard stories of people going from 0 to 100, but again, run the percentages. That's like less than 1% of our industry is capable of doing that. The rest of us have to build our schools up over a long period of time. And that's okay. That is the nature of the martial arts business. And if you don't accept that nature and understand the finances behind that, you're going to be very stressed out. So like, what if you don't sign anybody up for the first 6 months? Do you have 6 months worth of rent? You got to market on Facebook, on social media, Instagram. You need money for that for the first 6 months. Do you have 6 months of marketing costs? How are you going to pay your head instructor for 6 months? So like for me, when I open a location, I have the ability to open it. And if I don't sign a single person up for 6 months, I can pay all the bills.
For 6 months. Yeah. To have that emergency fund in there. And what would be the one thing that you did really well that you would recommend? Like what would be a do?
That's a great question. I think invest in people and don't give up on people. I think in our industry, I've heard a lot of stories, and I know this pain because I told you about it earlier. We put a lot of energy, a lot of love, a lot of time into our students, and then they leave. They go to college, or they take another job, or even worse, they open their own school 2 miles down the road, and it's a knife to the heart for the martial arts instructor. And I think I see a lot of people get very jaded and very upset, and they make a decision that it's not possible. You can't develop great people that will stick with you. They will screw you in some way. And it's not true. I mean, it is true that will happen, but it doesn't mean everyone is going to do that. And there are ways to build a team. And I think also on that note, and I talked to my partners about this because they're starting to experience it now that they're building their own teams, because the mission with them is, hey, you have to do what I did with you to open more locations and buy your freedom. So I'm going to coach you and help you, and I'm going to be behind you the whole way. But you need to understand 2 things. 1, you have to do it. And 2, you are going to have people leave you along the way. And you need to be prepared for that. And I think in our minds, if we think we're going to keep the majority of them, we're asking for pain. And I think if we understand that if we train 100 people and 2 of them stick around and go the distance, you only need a couple to open another location. So I'll make that trade all day long. Give me 100 people, and if I end up with 2 rock stars at the end of it, I won.
That's beautiful. All right. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. This was a big honor. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Tune in to our next episode as we continue to unpack how to operate and open multi-locations from the mindset of multi-location operator. Again, that was David Alvas. Check him out at financialfitnessfocus.com and usakarate.com. Is that correct, David? Did I get that
USK
right?
Karate.
There we go. Thanks so much, man.